on the AULA Undergraduate Studies faculty. We're glad to welcome you to this edition of Messy Conversations, where we are going to be joined by a former student of mine from way back in the day, Anna Guerrero, and her colleague Umar Hakim-Dey, who are going to be in conversation with us about building multiracial coalitions and the challenges and opportunities that they see there. And Elaine Parker-Gills will be moderating the conversation. Next week, we have Dr. Moore and Matt Lowe, who will be in conversation on the issue of reparations, and our own Clarence Williams will be moderating that conversation. So that promises to be a good, messy conversation. We encourage you to come, bring a friend, bring somebody who's not a friend, but show up. And as always, before we get started, our format is that the first half hour or so will be the conversation between Umar and Anna, and then we will open it up for everyone else to join the conversation. We ask that until that time you remain muted so that it doesn't disrupt the conversation that's taking place, and really encourage you to make this as conversational as possible by putting questions, comments, resources in the chat. And then as soon as we open up, we will start calling on you to come into the conversation. And that's always the richest part of what we do. And so we encourage you to do that. Very quickly, I want to do one thing before we get started. I know that a lot of us are still carrying a great deal of grief and confusion and frustration around events in the Middle East, in Gaza. And I know that most strongly through my students, who continue to be really just wrecked by what's going on. And I can see the ways that it's affecting their coursework. And so I'm teaching this class this quarter called Ecological Existentialism, How to Live Endings. And not this week, but next week, we're looking at the work of Valerie Kaur, who's a Sikh author and activist. Back in 2020, published a book called Love Sees No Stranger. And so we're going to be looking at that book in class. And I've been preparing, and a few things that Valerie Kaur says I wanted to bring into this space. She's writing in response to the attacks here in 9/11, which resulted in the anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, anti-Sikh violence that followed that. Took her out of a very lucrative career to become an activist and start what she calls the Revolutionary Love Project. So just a couple of quick things. Before Americans even had time to process our shock and count our dead after 9/11, our energies had already been redirected to war. A second quotation: unresolved grief inside a person is tragic. Unresolved grief inside a nation is catastrophic. And it releases enormous aggression in the world. Third one: we will only survive this era if people who stand in love are bolder than those who respond with hate. And in the context of those three, I offer you this from me, that maybe our most powerful response to the horrors in Israel and Palestine at this time, and as they spread further around the world, is to refuse to surrender our humanity. And with that, I hand things off to, I've forgotten who, oh, Elaine.
Well, thank you, David. I appreciate and I very much appreciate the words that you were sharing with us. In 1957, Dr. Martin Luther King said, voting is one of the highest mandates in our democratic tradition. And here we are in 2023, and many people across the nation will be voting tomorrow. And unfortunately, there are over 130 mandates and initiatives, anti-voting initiatives, that we still are focusing on one of the most traditional things we have as Americans. Out of that period, and even today, what we do in the community and the individuals that engage in the community has played a big role in our march forward. Today, we're really fortunate to have, and we want to say welcome back Anna, because she's a graduate of Antioch. And we welcome a new person to our community, Umar. And both of these individuals will be talking today about building multi-racial coalitions, the challenges and the opportunities. And I think in the same vein that David was just talking about and what is happening in our world today, it's a time to come together. It's a time to engage and a time to look forward to working together and various forms of empowerment and growth and development through social justice lens. Let me ask you to please take a look at the guide and you will see the bios of both these individuals, but I'd like to open the conversation with Umar and Anna speaking about the work they're doing in the community and how they believe this work will help bring people together as a common cause. So I'll start with Anna, just to give us a little background about what you're doing now, Anna. Quite extensive grassroots background.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Gills. And thank you all for welcoming me back. I graduated from Antioch in 2014 as a 43-year-old. And I found my time at Antioch very empowering and very fulfilling. So thank you to all the professors that are here on screen for the very enriching experience that you gave me. So I have been working in politics and in and around community organizing for over 30 years now. My first career was as a community organizer in faith-based spaces. That's what I did during my 20s and the 90s. For the past 2 decades, I worked in LA City government. I worked for the former mayor when he was a council member, council president, and then mayor. I was his chief of staff for 15 years. And now I am consulting. I have my one-woman practice where I help mission-driven leaders meet their goals. So I'll help organizations with strategic planning, policy guidance, stakeholder engagement, and leadership coaching. And one of the projects that I work on right now is consulting with Pico, California, which is a statewide network of 9 faith-based community organizations, like the work I used to do when I was a young community organizer. And this is how I've gotten to know Umar. I met Umar when I was with the mayor's office, and Umar was involved in our Interfaith Leadership Council and was a force there. And now that I am back in community organizing spaces and outside of government, I have gotten to know Umar much better, I think, because we're both in these multi-faith, multi-racial spaces, working together to bring people together to build power, to influence public policies that will improve the quality of life for the kinds of families that we represent in our work. I'll hand it over to Umar.
I think you're.
You never get over the mute trick with Zoom. I'm sorry. Anyway, assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Umar Hakim-Dey. I'm based in Compton, California. I'm the founder of Encourage, which is a 501c3 social enterprise. We help purpose-driven organizations and individuals expand their capacity. I'm also the board chair for LA Voice, which is a Pico, California federation. And LA Voice is an organizer here in Los Angeles County that focuses on building a better Los Angeles for multi-faith communities. So coalitions or multi-faith solidarity. So one of the purposes of building a multi-faith coalition is to create multi-faith solidarity. You know, you have three different, I'm gonna start with the Abrahamic faiths if I leave anybody out, but the Abrahamic faiths all have a theme that's in common with one another, and that's justice, whether it's moral justice or public justice. So, you know, if you look at each prophet and the women that's in these stories, they all moved people towards a common goal. So this is what building a multi-faith coalition, or what I say a multi-faith solidarity work is about. So right now I'm focused on a project called Project 2192, is where we want to bring more Muslims into the community organizing spaces, because it's very necessary. On April 20th, I went with Pico, California. This is one of the campaigns that Anna is working on, called Home is Sacred. It's basically around housing. Like for me, I always tell the story, if my mother did not return to her Lord, I would not be a homeowner in my own city. So that's how serious the housing crisis is for those who, if you was raised in your community, it's hard to buy a house or a tilt in your spot. So we went up to Sacramento. We talked to like 19 different state officials for 4 bills, and we moved 600 people from across the state into Sacramento. Now, out of 600 people, there was only 3 Muslims in the whole crowd. So I'm taking on the objective. I see your forehead went up. I was like, she's like, whoa. But that was you, Jen. I was like, she's like, whoa. But there was only 3 Muslims in the whole crowd. And I'm like, we share the same issues as any other renter or homeowner or community member. And I was wondering why we're not there. Not because Pico didn't put in the work, but now I'm taking on this objective to bring more Muslims into the community organizing space, especially on the voter engagement tip. So definitely, I'm just trying to play my role, pay my rent here on earth while I'm here, and trying to do the best that I can.
There is I saw a quote, very brief quote from Roland Martin, who's a journalist. He said, "Truth demands a voice. Speak up." Truth demanding a voice. I'd like to get your views of both of you relative to some of the programming. You mentioned some on the voting, but other social and economic engagement activities you're involved in, and how does that connect to, you know, the social justice and activism? Maybe Anna?
Sure, you came in and out a little bit, but I think I got the gist.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, sure. I think I got the gist of the question. So, you know, for me, it's been important throughout my work as a community organizer, when I was organizing outside of government and inside of government, to always work on policies that are related to economic justice, because I think that's core to us being able to thrive as individuals and to, you know, have what we need in order to build community. So, some of those policies that I've worked on more recently, including the policies that Umar mentioned that protect renters. Another one that is very important to me that I am involved in and engage other people and other organizations in also advancing is guaranteed income. Something that we worked on when I was in the mayor's office, where we were able through, thanks to COVID funding, we're able to launch a guaranteed income pilot that helped us collect data on how families spend extra money that they have to relieve some of the financial pressures that they face, which I hope will continue to build a movement to create more not just more guaranteed income pilots, which we have, many of across the state and across the country. But in the long run, my hope and that of many of the people that I work with is to make guaranteed income policies, permanent and more available to more people, so that we all have what we need to meet our basic needs and thrive, and then build communities that also thrive. So that to me is a very key social justice policy, Dr. Gills, that I want to continue to work on. Pico, California is working on. And again, there are incredible leaders across the state. Maybe in the future you can invite the former mayor of Stockton, Michael Tubbs, who is a leader in this effort, who is trying to build a national movement for guaranteed income. Because I think we all can do more to advance policies like this that create a more moral economy.
Yes, and I think the policy implementations are extremely critical. Umar, in looking at your website and what you're trying to do, the issues of empowerment and doing for self are very strong with really speaking truth to power. Would you like to comment at all on the empowerment movements? And we had talked a few weeks ago about people power.
Yes. So in building multi-faith solidarity or coalition building, when I first started, we did this program where we served the homeless downtown LA and across California. And so we were only bringing communities together to serve the unhoused. But then when we surveyed the recipients, they would say that they have housing issues. They would say that they have mental health situations. They would say that they need assistance to do this, that, and the other. So this is what led us into community organizing, because sometimes as an Angelino or even as an American, you feel powerless. You feel very powerless, especially when you're drowned out by the multimillionaires and their dollars and these corporations. So we know that power is built locally. And one of the three, I'm gonna say purposes. The first purpose of building power would be to move money and people in the direction of your goals. So when you see, like if you witness the Home is Sacred campaign and the GBI work that Anna's referring to, this is these relationships with political officials, and this is moving money and people towards a goal. And then the second one would be, what's the second one? The second one would be building your political influence, because and this is part of the relational power that we have to create between one of us, because you have to identify who in your community, like those interfaith panels, councils that we identified that the mayor had our power or a resolution, answer to what we were seeking. So this is when we used to have these meetings and discuss Los Angeles and its dynamics. And then the third objective would be, how do you want to be perceived? Or basically your narrative. So if I could ask each of you, describe with one word, how would you like to be perceived? Jen, go ahead. I'm gonna pick you.
Oh, you got me. Okay.
Just one word.
Kind.
Kind. Mark, how would you like to be perceived?
Thoughtful.
Thoughtful. Javon, how would you like to be perceived, sir?
Respected.
Respected. So if you should take these three adjectives, kind, thoughtful, respected, if this was a community, this is the projection that this is how we want to be perceived on a political, social, and community level. So controlling our narrative is very important when it comes to the three objectives of building power. And this empowers the leaders that we train on leadership development to speak for themselves. We don't speak for them, but Anna and everybody, we train these leaders to speak for themselves by taking their experiences and matching it with a solution to bring it together for a narrative and way. So the ones who have our power, they can resonate and understand where an individual might be feeling at the time because of a just and or an unjust policy that's in the sea. So moving money and people towards your goals, building political influence, and then how do you want to be perceived? Better yet, controlling your narrative. Because if we let our narrative get away from us, then they will give us a one-dimensional look on how our community is, and we know that's not what it is. So empowerment, developing people is very important in building a multi-faith solidarity.
Yeah, I mean, I like to build on what Umar just said, which was beautifully said. I think one of the things that I've always loved about community organizing and why I've stuck with it all these years is that it teaches you about the practice of politics. And we all practice democracy by voting, by, we'll show up at a march to either push for something or protest something. That's, practicing democracy, but practicing politics is really understanding policy, how power is moving, who has it, why, what self-interests are in the political arena, and how we can build our power, as Umar said, in order to advance our own interests as a community, which requires a commitment to learning. It requires forming collective power who share our interests. And sometimes it also requires compromise in order to move the needle, because we may not get everything we want the first time we launch a campaign for something. But in order to stay in the political arena and keep advancing, we sometimes need to compromise. And all of that is about the practice of politics. And that's what we learn in community organizing. Is that there's so much more to a democracy than just practicing our democracy. It's about practicing politics as well.
Do you think this form of engagement, how crucial or critical would it be for our future leadership? Leadership training, and I mean, it's very easy to say, about social justice and doing the right thing, and we're committed. And both of you are really looking at developing leaders from our community where they can feel, as Giovanna says, respected, and Mark is saying to be thoughtful. How do we practice that, or how do we go about that in terms of the organizing for the future? Because I think something has to change.
Can I go?
Either one of you be great.
So I grew up in Compton, California. Compton is a hub city in the middle of the county of Los Angeles. It takes me 15 minutes to get anywhere in Los Angeles County on a good day, without the traffic. So in growing up, you learn certain things in your community that you can label as a transferable skill that can work on the next level of your life. So one of those things is being authentic. and owning your authenticity. So in what you was asking, Doc, is like leadership training and community organizing develop transferable skills that you can utilize at work, at home. And I think, Anna, you mentioned it earlier, like even if you're a coach, you know how to dialogue. You learn how to dialogue with different individuals and de-escalate a situation when someone tries to provoke you. So and one of the main skills is active listening. It's to do more, because we have these things called a tool called one-to-one, the art of the one-to-one. So this is when I say, hey David, can I call you up for a one-to-one, and we start building this relational power to get to know one another. So, and out of that, I learned his common interests. I may learn his favorite foods. I may learn his political interests. And then that inquiry will make me very inquisitive on the next one. So this is a skill that organizers develop to do more listening than talking, so they could get, understand the person. Because in coalitions, we have to build the cushion, because the elephant in the room might surface. So we have to build that necessary cushion that when the elephant in the room surfaces, we know how to stick together. So answer your question, leadership develop transferable skills that you can use across the board in any area you work in.
Anna, you want to add into?
Yeah, no, that was very powerful, Umar.
Thank you.
I recently read a book called The Power Paradox by Dr. Keltner, I think is his name. And he talks about how powerlessness is one of the most important crises of our time. It's right up there, as important as, the issue of climate change and the issue of poverty, because when people don't feel like they have power, they don't feel like they have agency. And therefore it's harder to learn, it's harder to love, it's harder to understand what it is that you want so that you can work towards your goals. And he argues that we should worry about that in educational institutions, about the learning of what power means and how we can build it for ourselves. And he also argues that you build power through relationships. And that's what Umar is talking about. That power is achieved through relationships. It's achieved through social capital. And once you have that foundation, then you have the beginnings of what you need as a person to achieve your goals, and the community that you need to build you up towards that. And it does require that willingness to listen, the willingness to get to know people, also the willingness to share of yourself and to set aside your own biases sometimes, to be willing to be humble. Somebody said humble in the chat, so that you could actually be open to a relationship with someone who might be different than you.
Yeah, that also seems to align with you all coming up with this particular title here of building multiracial coalitions, the opportunities and the challenges. We're getting very close to where we're going to open it up to the audience, but there's a couple of things I'd like to ask of you. What thus far has seemed to be the biggest challenges in building these critical coalitions and the multiracial interfaith collaboration? What's been the most difficult, particularly during these times when we're dealing with everything from lack of respect and the rights of women, it's anti-Blackness, lack of LGBT and trans people empowerment. So where do we go from here in terms of you telling us about the areas that have been the most challenging?
I'll jump in. I mean, I think the biggest challenge is that working across race and even working across class and culture it's hard. It takes patience, and it takes time. I believe in self-organizing. I've been active as a Latina in political spaces. I organized the Latino Democratic Club. I've always believed in that, but I've also always believed that in order to make transformational change, you cannot just organize with your own community. You have to organize with other communities and build collective power. But it is much easier to just organize with people that speak the same language, that eat the same food, that, where you can, you don't have to explain everything because you have these shared experiences. It's easier and it's more comforting. I do think it's necessary to self-organize especially for those of us that come from communities that have been marginalized. It is very empowering to self-organize and to find strength in your identity. But then we have to do the work to build bridges to other communities, because if we don't, then we buy it, we give into this narrative that politics, that power, that the economy is all a zero-sum game, and that more for one group means less for my group. Mm-hmm. So we have to just do the work. And again, it'll be hard. Sometimes people say things that might hurt another people's feelings, and we need to stop and have a discussion about intent versus impact, which, Umar and I have been in spaces like that, and we have to take the time to pause and have those conversations, because there will be difficult moments when you're organizing across race and class and culture and gender. But we have to be intentional about it in order to build those multiracial spaces. And we build those multiracial spaces because that's the only way we're going to make transformational change.
Absolutely. Umar, would you like to comment?
The last part. One of the challenges in building multi-faith solidarity or multi-faith coalitions is tapping into a person's empathy. Because when we all come to the table with our different pains or different experiences, but someone in the room always wanted to trump that their pain is deeper than mine. Mm-hmm. Or my pain is deeper than theirs. But the thing about pain is that we have to realize is having an empathetic sense that it hurts. So that's the binding. I would think that's the binding synergy that we need to really tap into when building these multi-faith coalitions, is to have a strong sense of empathy for the next person, because at the end of the day, we're trying to win each other over, like Dale Carnegie said. We're trying to win each other over in the best way so we could do this work. So I think having the compassion and because we have empathy, that opens up compassion for the next person, the next man or woman. So I think teaching a group how to tap into another one's pain, and that it's not more than yours, but it's just as equal as yours because it hurts.
Yeah, yes. And I think ongoing dialogue certainly helps that. We want to encourage everyone to place their comments in the chat. And while we're doing that, and Sarah Beth kind of let us know kind of where we are. One last thing I would like to bring up. What do you all think would be the role of institutions of higher learning? For instance, institutions like Antioch University, long history of engagement, social justice, in terms of equity and engagement and partnering with the community. What do you see the role in higher education in general? Obviously, we both have looked at coalitions that help form partnerships. What do you think in higher education? That's one of the reasons that we're dialoguing today. And as we see across the nation, so much is going on in that area. So I'll start with Anna and then Umar.
Yeah, thank you for that question. My thought is that institutions like Antioch can continue to cultivate leaders And I think particularly leaders who can practice some important skills. I wrote some down because I didn't want to forget anything. I think institutions of higher learning should cultivate leaders that have the humility to admit what they don't know or don't understand, and leaders who have an openness to refining their perspective based on learning and evidence, and cultivating leaders who are willing to consider all perspectives and respect other points of view, leaders who can admit to their own biases, and leaders who have patience with the process of building trust. So I think the most important thing institutions of higher education can do is cultivate and encourage leaders that practice those habits.
Okay, thank you. Umar?
So if I heard you correctly, the question is, how can academics align with what? Can you repeat that again for me?
Oh, just institutions of higher learning, education. What role can they play in this coalition building and partnerships and moving forward with social justice?
So I'm on a Zoom full of academics. Please do not hold me accountable for what I'm about to say. My job is to agitate and or inspire. I hope it leads to a change. But I got my master's in ethical leadership over at Claremont Lincoln. And one of the things, I'm stuttering. I'm nervous what I'm about to say. I got my master's in ethical leadership over at Claremont Lincoln. And I got into a debate, argument, because the professor kept insinuating that this is how it should work on the ground. And I was like, man, what you teaching me is all theory. You know, you teaching, you coming at me out of a book, and I'm doing this work every day. And I got an example of my work in my papers. So after I leave you, I'm going to Skid Row to implement this right now. So you can't come at, so what I'm trying to say is, like, it should be, I feel it should be like more real-time practitioner work that is taught. Yeah. And we have some great authors, you know, all respect to them, you know, the professors, everybody's highly intellectual. I just think it should be more relevant at times to what's going on the ground. Because some of the rules, you will get your hat handed to you coming in with theory work to someone who's on Skid Row, going through a mental health issue, and I'm trying to quote Dale Carnegie to them. You know, that's not going to work on Skid Row. So I just think sometimes, you know, theory is cool, but it should be more real-time practices and have more relationships with those on the ground who's doing the work. So I hope I didn't, you know, disrespect any of your teachings, but that's just how I feel.
Well, speaking as a professor, I must say I agree with you with a closer focus on lived experiences. Absolutely. I think that says a lot, and thank you for that. Well, we're going to open it up to questions. Sarah, do we have comments or questions?
We have a Carolyn put a comment in the chat, and it says, I'm curious about how we might organize around taxes and institutional divestment. And she's talking about Biden's decision to send aid. And this can lead us to another messy conversation on that topic. But I think what it says to me, and unfortunately, there was another message that Carol had to leave. So she's not here to speak her question and share this, but I am holding that, first of all, this is one of those things that you just referred to, I think, Anna, of like how people come to their thoughts about these issues and building these kinds of coalitions from a very personal place often, and how complex that is, and the fact that we are watching what is happening politically as Americans, but we may have relationships, and we know we do here on our campuses that are very personally attached to those issues. So I guess, because we're Antioch, we're thinking about how to facilitate conversation around such difficult topics. And we're not all as faculty trained in that way of organizing people around issues that are extremely personal and frankly life and death. And I think we would love to hear your wisdom around how to really think about such organizing, but also to hold the incredible pain that is tied to this particular issue. And I think that is in this question itself.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, Sarah Beth, but I guess I'll just answer part of your question. And that is that I consider one of the roles that I have now that I'm outside of government is and I'm in community organizing spaces is, humanizing policymakers. I felt like when I was in government, I humanized everyday people for policymakers, and now I do a little bit of the opposite, because we all have a tendency to dehumanize each other and to go into our tribes and our camps, and that happens to elected officials as well. So I would say that that most elected officials, most policymakers really care what their constituents think about them. Many of them want to get reelected. So when people organize to express a position, and they organize so that there's a lot of people expressing a position to that policymaker, they listen. And I think engaging elected officials and policymakers in conversations about their policy positions is something that we should all do more of, and maybe we're not meeting with the mayor or the congressperson or the state senator. Maybe we're meeting with a high-level staff person. That's still a very powerful person to meet with. So I encourage people who want to move an agenda, whether it's what's happening right now in the world or other policies, that they not just develop relationships with people that they want to be in coalition with outside of government, but also develop relationships with policymakers and move ideas forward that way as well.
Umar, you have thoughts?
Yeah. It would be wonderful if we all could jump up one day and say we all not paying taxes, you know what I'm saying, and see what the reaction will be from the politicians and the government. Because when I got my first check from CJ's Pub and Pizza, I was like, who is FICA? You know, so I'm like, why did he get all my money? So, but I want to align with Anna. Right now, we are in an extraordinary time where voter engagement is going to be extremely important. As she mentioned, the politician or the elected official wants to be reelected. But now, I don't know how many Republicans or Democrats that we have on this call, but in any sense, voter engagement and teaching individuals to vote towards your interests instead of just voting red or just voting blue. Because I know my community say, oh, y'all are Democrats, so vote Democrat. But the community is now saying Democrats aren't serving our interests. And then Trump came about Republican. A lot of people jumped the boat and jumped to Republican. And that's because we never had an agenda. Well, at least our community never recognized what an agenda, a 5-point or a 10-point agenda is, and how we could use that to properly align with the individual, whether he's red or blue, to serve our needs. So this is one of the things that I'm encouraging the organizations in my belt. We have to come up with an agenda that's going to serve our needs. So I'm thinking like education, representation, housing, and racial equity. So if you cannot help us in these areas, you may or you may not get my vote, because we have to start thinking in the sense of, this is my 5 or 10 point agenda, and you have to match at least 60 to 70% of this card in order for you to get my vote. So voter engagement is very, very, very important, is what we'll be working on. So I would like to ask everybody right now, will you vote responsibly to your needs and interests in this coming up elections? By show of hands. All right, that's voter engagement. I got a pledge from you. I didn't tell you who to vote for. I just want to make sure that you honor that right, because a lot of people have died to the wayside because of not having the ability to vote.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Umar. Our next question comes from David Tripp. David, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Thank you both to Umar and Anna. And Anna, you were talking earlier about the difference between practicing democracy and practicing politics. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about a lot of conversations I've had with people who, I don't want to use labels, but they, are very idealistic, right, about democracy, or very idealistic about justice. Or if not idealistic, they have strong views on, well, this is what this is. And you, by talking about, well, great, but you've also got to practice politics. And that's the practical, logistical, relational, messy power part of getting these agendas that Umar was just talking about forward. So I'm turning to you to say, what have you learned about how to help people see the importance of that? Because often when you mention that, or I mention, whoever mentions it, they're like, oh, no, that's selling out, right? That's, we're just going to go all the way with our vision. So I'm curious, any insights you have about helping people come to those realizations?
Part of it, in my experience, is what Umar talked about just now, and that is having conversations about what is our agenda, like what is it that we're fighting for, and developing that platform that he described, and then starting to work on it. I'll give you an example that Umar and I were both a part of recently. One of the bills that Pico, California worked on it's called the Homelessness Prevention Act. It was signed by the governor in September. When that bill started out, it had it prohibited evictions without just cause, and it also had a rent cap to it. And we worked hard, as Umar knows. So the leaders of all the congregations involved in Pico, California lobbied, and it was clear midway through the campaign that that the group didn't have enough power to pass the bill with the rent cap. And we could have a whole other session on the apartment association and the realtors association versus tenant rights advocates. That's a whole other topic. But at that moment, there just wasn't enough power, or the circumstances or the environment were not such that that bill could pass as originally envisioned. So the leadership made a decision to table the rent cap piece for this cycle and focus on protecting tenants, because the analysis was, okay, we could just say we'll fall on our sword and this bill will just be completely tabled and we won't win. So the decision was to table that, fight for the renter protections that prohibit evictions without just cause, and the bill passed. And the way you can look at that is, we are living to fight another day. We're coming back next legislative cycle. We might be at a different place where we can pass a rent cap. We all probably just saw that the LA City Council just debated a rent cap just last week. That is creating a different environment for this next cycle that Pico, California might be able to leverage in order to bring back a camp for next legislative cycle. So I'd argue, I mean, and this is all arguable, that that finding that compromise at that moment in time gave the organization the ability to win, not everything, but win something, which allows it to build its power so that it can come back even more powerful next legislative cycle. And part of that power comes from the fact that people who are involved got the experience of winning. And that's really important for people to feel the experience of winning a campaign. That will keep them engaged. And then you can come back and fight harder next time and fight for more.
And also it keeps them in the game. It keeps them involved and engaged with something at stake. Yeah. Obviously, they're being heard. Yeah. Thank you, Anna.
See that Lisa has a hand up. Lisa, did you want to?
Hi, yes. Thank you. After listening with what Anna and Umar had to say about building a coalitions and in terms of voting as well, how do we extend that to our youth, especially since we have gotten rid of civic classes, we've gotten rid of arts and music, and how do we bridge that gap so that our youth can come into our voting society and be a part of this building coalition that both Anna and Umar have talked about?
Anna, do you want to take a stab at that and then?
I think I saw Umar speaking out, or did you?
Oh, I didn't see.
Yeah, but I think his mute button was on.
Did she say how to engage the youth?
Yes, I did.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One of the ways that we can engage our youth is listen to them. A lot of times as adults, and I'm a grandfather now, a lot of times as an adult, we feel we don't have to listen to them and they don't have the capacities to say, this is what I believe in. But in order to win the youth over these days, we have to engage them in the way that we are engaging our peers and give them the same type of attention that they need to navigate society, especially from your household. So you may get into engaging conversation by watching a Marvel movie with them, because those movies are very political, you know what I'm saying? Or even Star Wars. If you ever watched the Clone Wars or even Loki, you could get into a deep conversation with your youth by just pairing up and watching a Loki on Disney Plus with them. I'm not advertising for them, I'm just saying. But definitely we have to listen to our youth and try to identify their self-interest and guide them towards where they can accomplish that at or achieve it.
Rosa, I see you have your hand up. Did you want to add something?
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. I want to share my appreciation with Umar and Anna for the wealth of expertise that you're sharing with us. And I'm glad that we are recording this because I would like to revisit many of the ideas that are here. Part of the arguments that you were making when you were talking about moving from the idea of self-organizing, that is comforting, that is somehow predictable, somehow it's assured that it's possible. Because you know the code, you know the language, you know the narratives. Like I'm moving from that into organizing the unknown and what it means in terms of the work. And then you mentioned that there's a lot of work that requires a lot of patience. And that sometimes is a matter of going one-on-one, and that's part of the difficult, right? So if I understood correctly, and I totally follow the argument, and I can see that happening, suddenly it came to me topics that I'm dealing right now with my class. One of the classes that I'm teaching lately is digital analysis. Sorry, the critical analysis of digital media and what is happening with the media and how difficult it is one-on-one relationships right now when there's this very promiscuous thing going on with the internet, stuff like that, and how the social media is mob media rather than one-on-one. So how is that hindering or affecting the possibility to do this very fine, difficult work that is being able to achieve this one-on-one connection with all this noise that is around? Because I suddenly pop up my head. So I wonder what do you see that challenge? Both of you, Umar, Anna, you want to comment on this?
Anna.
Sure. I think this is part of the reason that I've been committed to faith-based spaces for so long, because there's something about going to a congregation and sitting next to people and, listening to a sermon every week that is very, just calls to all of our better angels. I think, not always, but in my experience, that's been the case. So I acknowledge that it's definitely challenging to organize in environments where there are people out there who believe that by sending out emails or sending out text messages or posting a statement on social media, they're organizing and they're building power. And that might be the case if you have a lot of followers, but for the most part, for most of us, that's not how we build power. That's not how we build relationships. It's not how we actually create change. So for me, the one pathway has been to organize with faith-based institutions where people still go to a place where they come together and find commonality with each other and are tied together by a value system. But it is definitely challenging to organize in these times. But that said, I think most people are hungry for community, are hungry for relationships with people and to be together. So I think, I never give up hope, and I always find people to organize with. Whatever it is. I see Umar nodding. There's, you gotta get out there and you gotta take some risks. And you have to be vulnerable and you have to be, willing to introduce yourself to people who may not, who may think you're a little bit odd because you want to organize a project with them. But once you get past that initial moment, I think most people want to be in community and they want to work together on stuff and know that that makes life more fulfilling and more interesting. That's been my experience. I don't know what Umar's is.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you.
I think we share the same experience because what I hear you saying is that commonality, you have your activists, and they're the ones who, like, in my brain, jump up and be like, I don't like what you're talking about. Call the people out with truth to power. But then you have the organizers, such as Anna and myself and LA Voice and Pico. We take what the activist is saying and convert that into a strategy that's going to win, hopefully get us to our goals. So a strategy, if you got a burning house and you got a pool of water right behind you, the strategy is how you're going to get the water to the house. A hose. So the house will burn without the strategic tool of a water hose that's going to tap into the water to put the fire out. So this is what organizers, this is how we think. There's a strategy. So like Pico, Anna and them, they developed a strategy, an open source strategy that could be practiced by the 9 other federations in California. And then each federation takes this strategy and develop it to their own community and needs. And to filter out what you mentioned earlier, the mock media, this strategy gives us our mission and vision of the goals that we're trying to set. So if anything creeps in or try to creep into the messaging that does not relate to the strategy that's been created or our mission and vision to get these goals or the 6-month campaign, that teaches that shows the individual that propaganda is not related to what we're trying to fight for. So I'm gonna do my best to filter that out. And when it comes to social media, we have to check the sources of the content that we see, because if not, we could be promoting some content that was developed by our opposition that'll win over our emotions because it favors what we're talking about. So having strategy gives us our mission and vision during our campaign, and we utilize this to filter out any unnecessary noise.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Umar and Anna, for that. If I can interrupt for a moment, I want to thank you both and thank everyone who joined us. Some of you will have to leave now because it is like a few minutes after 5. I want to ask those who have to leave, please join us next week where we'll have a conversation on reparations. Should be quite interesting. And who knows, we might even hear some Gil Scott-Heron. So I very much hope to see everyone next week. And those of you can join us, we're going to take about 10 more minutes or so to continue our conversation with Anna and Umar.
There's some great conversation happening in the chat. I encourage you to check it out. And just saying that, Jen, do you want to add anything about what you're mentioning here with regard to a shift that might be taking place generationally or with fundraising?
Yeah, I was just thinking about my own experience with a couple of friends where we were fundraising for the Alzheimer's Association, and we had a lot of success when I had like a web page and I told my friends about it via text, but then once I put it on Instagram and Facebook, kind of took off. So it made me think about how so many of my friends, especially with like stories on social media, they check them constantly throughout the day. And so I was trying to think of younger generations as well and how they really listen to each other. And again, I think to several people's points that we need to be careful what's being posted, and can we take advantage of that very popular platform for the better.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to say that it's not a tool, Jen. You're absolutely right. It definitely is. I mean, I know from my own experience in organizing in a lot of different spaces, for example, I do fundraising for candidates for elected office, people I like, I believe in. It takes a lot of courage to run for office, and it also takes a lot of money. So I will fundraise for those candidates that I support, and I will definitely use social media. But I have the best success when I start with a relationship with someone. So when I have a relationship, because we work together on things over time, then I could, I can use text messaging, social media as a tool to draw on that relationship capital that I have to help convince that person to also invest in a candidate that I believe in, that they may not know, but they're relying on my relationship, my word, that this person is worth them investing their personal dollars in. So I think you're right, but I think it's a discernment that Umar is talking about, just being able to know what the tools are, how they're used, and to be, a critical user of these tools.
Definitely, as my sister mentioned, social media is definitely part of the strategy. And we have to tap into those influencers who have a following. And even sometimes we may have to pay for the boost in order to get it to a larger market, more views. You know what I'm saying? Because that's the core of social media. When people see those numbers, okay, this has got to be something to it. So they see them 2,000 or 5,000. That's because somebody paid for the advertisement or the boost in order to get it really hurt. Any more questions? I got a question. Marvel or DC?
I didn't hear you, Umar.
I was asking him any questions. Marvel or DC? Do you like Marvel movies or DC movies better, or comics?
The ones that are paying the actors and the folks that help the actors, maybe? I don't know which one that is. I love it. I think I would just ask you, Umar, what are your best strategies for getting to that interest, say in youth or anybody that you want to organize with? And I think for my own experience, I think everything that you've been sharing today is you both have been sharing today has been spot on. But I also think that there's some magical skills that each of us brings to the way that we organize and how we cultivate those relationships and how we get to know people that can really take agency and notice their own gifts as useful to some of these fights or just campaigns, I guess. So I'm curious, what are some of your favorite strategies to really getting to know what somebody cares about?
I'm a geek. I'm a real nerd. So I like design thinking, and design thinking designs for the end user. So we really have to take an empathetic approach to define a problem what the end user is is interested in. So it would be easy for me to tell you what we organizing for, but it would be better for me to listen and understand how we can organize together. So as a design thinker from I learned over at Stanford. Not that I graduated from there, I just got a certificate from there. That I learned is to design your strategy for the end user, not just for ourselves. You know, that's where the empowerment steps in at, and like people post cats all the time because they know that the end user are going to fall in love with that kitten when they see it. So, and then they hit you with the message.
It's babies and puppies and kittens and maybe sex.
So
can't use all those strategies at the university, but
so basically designed for the one who's going to use or execute your strategy.
Yeah. I see also, Charlie, did you have something that you wanted to share or a question to ask?
Oh, well, now that you've poked me, I'll share my thoughts, but I wasn't going to say anything. Hard to jump into a conversation of experts and with my 2 cents. One thing, as possibly one of the younger people visible on this chat, that I would remind people is, and this is speaking to someone who doesn't really identify with the current youngest generation, but I do think there's more communities happening online than sometimes we give them credit for. The example that came to mind most recently is John and Hank Green have a big following, and I think it's less in so much that you can, I think you're totally right about advertising and getting to that population, but I think they found ways to, have that become a community that cares about things, and so they can, easily make change with the number of people that are kind of following them, and there is sort of this community values that are there. So I feel like the online can become this. Where are these communities that are already built, and where can you jump into an already kind of set community in a way that I think we didn't really, I don't think like a lot of, different groups, Twitter's not really built for that in the same way that all the Patreon people that follow Climate Town. So we're thinking about how do we better design cities. I feel like there's a lot of that organizing that can be done online in so much that there are already people having discussions with their own kind of shared culture and experience that can be activated. So there's my 2 cents. Thanks for poking me.
I think you're absolutely right about that, Charlie. Yeah, and there's plenty of examples starting. I mean, for me, working in government, like the first example for me of that was Occupy. because I was working at City Hall when that whole movement was there. So you're absolutely right. I think I'm personally just committed to organizing with people. I think Umar is as well, just developing those relationships. So there's different models, there's different methodologies for achieving a goal. And part of what I'm committed to in my work is not just moving policies and making the world a better place for people who have been historically powerless or marginalized, but it's also developing relationships with people, because I think ultimately that is what's going to help us get past some of this divisiveness that we are facing in the world right now. And if we can humanize each other, and that will come from actual human to human relationships. But you're absolutely right that online communities can definitely create change.
I think I want to clarify my thought, though, is I think that is a source for building those relationships. I had a classmate who was telling me about how she made a group of international different people that all got into regular video calls like we're all doing here, right? And so I think there is we have this commonality that we can then use to build those personal relationships more, right? Like I would have not a reason to speak with any of you if not for this particular Monday meeting. You know what I mean? And so I think there's something valuable there of how can this be the jumping off point in so much as building that relationship from the foundation of we all do this thing. Say, we all go to church together, we all watch this person's videos. Like there's an interesting how can that be the commonality point? So
right. Well, that's part of what we're going to be experimenting with is there's most people, well, maybe that's I'm overgeneralizing, but a lot of people don't go to a congregation, but they might consider themselves Jewish or Muslim or Catholic. So they identify with that faith culturally, or in maybe to some extent practice it, but they don't go to a place. So for people who do the kind of work that Umar and I do, like figuring out how to connect with people that could be motivated to participate civically based on their faith values, our way to connect with them is through social media tools and online communities. So it does go both ways for sure.
Go ahead, Umar.
No, I was saying I agree. Sometimes you might have to go on Drink Champs to get your political views heard by an audience that needs to hear it. So they have developed these like your favorite podcaster can create awareness for your cause and get you next to people who you couldn't normally get to.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. I'm noticing the time that we have committed for this, and it's almost over. And I just want to say thank you to you both, and of course to Dr. Gills for helping us today to facilitate this important conversation about the challenges of building coalitions and doing it from an anti-racist and inclusive perspective. Thank you so much for being here and for your work in the community. We wish you the best, and we'll hope to hear more about what you're both working on as we go forward.
Well, we're going to make sure that we reach out again and build these relationships further. And that's part of what we do. It's part of Messy Conversation. So very, very happy to have you. And it is 5:14, and I promised you no later than 5:15. So we're right on target here. So once again, thank you. Let's please give our brother and sister hand here.
Have a good evening.
Peace.
Good evening. And you'll get our announcement for next week. And then even if we have the other piece, once we get an update from David, we'll let you know. I think you'll find it.
Oh, and you can follow me at Encourage1970 on Instagram.
Encourage1970 on Instagram. Very well. Thank you so very much. And I need to order 2 shirts.
Okay, I'll get in contact with you.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
And we